Chapter 61. The Wolf Fong That's Everywhere. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the planet number N65871, the war was still going. On the situation of capturing the starships, the Special Tactical Forces really maximized the effect with this surprise attack, and within only 3 minutes, they managed to take over 2 destroyers and 5 frigates. Their attacks were quite brutal. They would immediately rush to the targeted ship, place explosives on the outside of the pressurized capsule, blow the gate open and then charge in to kill all enemies inside. After seizing control of the ship, they would finally start bombarding heavily at other enemy ships. Under the cooperation with the Special Tactical Force, the Earth's Federation Army had also taken hold in this starship warfare, and started to gradually form an advantage. In comparison to the victory secured by the Atlantic and the Special Tactical Force, it was a lot harder for the ground troops. The 1st Legion used a strategy called the Tactical Three Wings, which let the left, center, and right wings to advance all at once to siege and lock down the enemy espers. The advantage of this three wings tactic was that it had strong control over the battlefield, and it was very difficult for them to provide reinforcement for their air units, which gave valuable time for their allies to seize and control enemy starships. However, the disadvantage of this strategy was the 3 wings must all advance at once. If any of the wings gets broken, then the entire formation will be completely disrupted, causing the other 2 wings to lose coordination and become surrounded by the enemies. Now the situation was very dangerous. The right-wing 1st Legion's Deputy Chief Soros seemed like he couldn't advance any further, but the center wing led by Long Chuan was still formidable and rushed all the way to the enemy main forces center. Thus, the lagging right wing could not provide any support to the center wing, and it will in turn also hurt the left-wing troops led by the other Deputy Chief Wu Qingfeng. This is because they will have to provide more reinforcements to the center wing to make up for the right wing, and that really increased their pressure several times. Soros had become very anxious. While covered in blood, he raised his 3-tipped double-edged sword and shouted, "Brothers! Let's charge forward together! Charge! We must charge forward into the enemy crowd!" Boom! Under the leadership of Soros, the right-wing troops launched another round of brutal assaults. This 3 wings tactic must be quick in order to be effective. The faster the rush, the less time enemies had to be ready and react. Otherwise, if the enemies established a firm footing, then it will force Earth's ground troops into fighting in a disadvantageous position. Do it in one breath, or you will tire and finally you will be exhausted. That's why it was already the right wing's 3rd time trying to advance without any success. Soros was already anxiously stomping the ground, but he couldn't do anything. The enemies were already growing in number and stronger ones were showing up. Now that they had a firm footing, the right wing situation was becoming more and more difficult. Seeing how the center wing was still advancing like a tidal wave, the left wing Wu Qingfeng's troop, although were in tremendous pressure but still closely following Long Chuan's footsteps, Soros and his brothers at the right wing really hated how they weren't strong enough to provide more help. Suddenly, just when Soros was anxious enough to hit a wall with his head, a team immediately arrived like a mad gale. Han's Wolf Fong Squad. After receiving Long Chuan's order, the 49-men Wolf Fong Squad finally started brandishing the butcher knives in their hand. Void Domain, activate. Han roared in anger and activated a domain of 10 meters in radius, instantly depriving all powers inside. Onslaught position, kill. Just when the raiders were about to use their powers to attack the Wolf Fong Squad, they surprisingly found out that they couldn't do shit anymore. For these Esper soldiers, their powers had already become a big part of their life, and when they suddenly realized this cruel reality they quickly fell into a panic. Enemies panicking, what do we do? Of course, we cut them. Enemies are resisting, what do we do? Lift our weapons, cut harder. The 1st Legion's right-wing brothers suddenly realized, the Wolf Fong Squad was like a legendary violent battalion. They take turns cutting enemies like cutting open melons and slicing through vegetables. This suddenly solved the stalemate, and suddenly the enemy's corpses were everywhere. Follow Wolf Fong. Cover their back. Soros shouted in excitement. Before the war, Long Chuan already told Soros that the Wolf Fang squad would be the Joker card of the First Legion, but Soros never knew that the Wolf Fangs were that ferocious. The moment they arrived at the right wing, the situation immediately changed and they instantly freed up the right wing to advance again. This was called one fresh strategy being used for days. The enemies hadn't seen this type of fighting formation yet, of course they wouldn't have the time to come up with ways to deal with it. Han's void domain robbed all enemies of their powers, forcing them to use their weapons, which made the enemies adapt to a strategy they haven't used for years. But this was war, and this sudden change could easily cause many to lose their lives. So, the moment the Wolf Fang squad showed up, they took down hundreds of enemies and achieved unimaginable victory. They were like the opening bloody mouth of a beast, biting into the enemies and tearing apart their flesh. Han, look at the left wing. Xian Beige was now Han's assistant, and he reminded Han during a brief pause in battle. Han turned around and saw that Wu Qingfeng's left wing is also slowing down. They encountered the organized ranged troops from the enemy side. Fireballs and ice arrows were flying all over the places, and the First Legion's left wing suffered heavy casualties and looked like they couldn't hold it anymore. Qingzhong, left wing. Han raised his arm and shouted. Shua the Qingzhong that weighed more than 600 pounds played the role of a diligent old cattle. There were fiber ropes attached onto his combat suit which allows the soldiers of Wolf Fang to grab on. Once Han deactivated his void domain, Qingzhong used his unique conversion descent power and launched himself right off the ground, instantly bringing the Wolf Fang to the left wing. Onslaught formation. Kill! Han commanded loudly. The Wolf Fang that just appeared at the right wing magically arrived at the left wing, and they began to diffuse the pressure from the enemies on their brothers at the left wing, slaughtering their way into the enemy formation again and creating a path of blood leading all their brothers at the left wing straight into the enemies. From the right wing to the left wing, then from the left wing to the right. After a few rounds, the First Legion's brothers realized just how magical the Wolf Fang squad was. They didn't really have a fixed place on the battlefield. They were like free men, quickly appearing at wherever there was need for them. Where the soldiers couldn't hold it anymore, the Wolf Fang squad would arrive. What a group of bloodthirsty and violent wolves. With incredible melee prowess and the penetration capability of a sharp Fang, they even had the ability to rescue when there were brothers and sisters that were left behind. They have now single-handedly moved the entire legion forward. The powerful void end ability not only made Han more violent, it also made everyone around him violent as well. They used that violence and completely steamrolled the enemy. There was Long Chuan in the center driving the entire legion forward, and there was the Wolf Fang squad appearing at random times at the left and right wings to catch the enemies off guard. Suddenly, the main battlefield was pushed forward at least an entire kilometer, leaving behind rivers of blood and bodies everywhere. Seeing how the three-wing tactic was achieving an overwhelming amount of success, the three wings finally started converging towards the enemy center. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed completely. Another giant dragon suddenly appeared on the other side of the battlefield. It was as if a blue lightning bolt had struck down from the sky directly at the four-eyed celestial dragon. Flames suddenly erupted like the volcano. The strongest raider Lucas against the strongest warrior from Earth, Long Chuan. The ultimate matchup between the two legends finally began. Bov. Chapter 62. Violent Siege. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When the battle has arrived at this stage, it could be said that the end was already decided. The Earth Federation army was fully prepared, utilizing subtle tactics coupled with the wild card of the Wolf Fang squad to force the outlaws into a dead end. The interceptor bomb was still releasing wave interference, so even if Lucas and his team wanted to flee, none of the battleships could take off. Thus, the only way left for them was to fight to the death against Earth's army. So, Lucas led the chiefs of several other major raider and pirate groups. This group of the most powerful outlaws all rushed toward the middle to find Long Chuan, thinking that this man with the four-eyed dragon was their biggest threat. Rumble! The collision between the lightning and the four-eyed dragon sounded the battle horn of the aces. Han at the left wing saw this scene. He didn't feel nervous at all, but instead, his blood boiled. It's time for the final battle. Han's eyes glanced over the last members of the Wolf Fang squad and shouted, all of that hard training was for this moment today. Let's go. Shua Qingzhong played the role of the diligent old cattle again. He took all the comrades of Wolf Fang and rushed straight to the middle of the formation. After all these series of rushes, Chen had lost a lot of weight already. In the middle, the ill and skinny Long Chuan was carrying the smile of a joker, and his face was still as pale as snow. At this moment, he was already surrounded by the group of high-level espers led by Lucas. The army obviously was not strong enough to be their opponents, so they all stood aside. However, Lucas was still very confused, because Long Chuan didn't look busy at all and all the Earth soldiers surrounding them were also gearing up and getting ready to strike. Lucas was completely angered by Long Chuan's smile. He was just a weak guy stricken with a severe illness, so how dare he be this dismissive of him? Another blue lightning bolt struck towards Long Chuan, but the four-eyed dragon proudly swung towards the lightning to take the hit. Boom! The blue lightning dealt a critical blow to the dragon, and the four-eyed celestial dragon that Long Chuan was so proud of got completely crushed, turning into a cloud of bright white dust, dancing in the wind like snowflakes. The source energy Eudemon is dead. Kill him! Lucas shouted. Since the summoning, Long Chuan's Eudemon dragon was the sole pillar of support that was keeping the center wing moving forward. The giant and magical source energy Eudemon was invincible, but as the stronger Lucas made his move, Long Chuan's four-eyed celestial dragon was taken down. In a short time, it would be impossible for Long Chuan to gather his source energy again and summon a second dragon. The situation turned into an unparalleled crisis. The First Legion and the Outlaw Alliance both began their assault again, but there was a clear gap between the two sides. The First Army only had a Long Chuan, but the Outlaw Alliance had aces like Lucas, Defoe, Amir Khan, Donald, etc. If the two sides got into melee battles, Long Chuan's side will be at a disastrous disadvantage. Suddenly, seeing the two sides were in close proximity just before clashing, the outlaws had saved up their energy to unleash all their ability attacks to win this war from one swoop. And just when they were lost in the dream of victory and about to strike, the Wolf Fang squad arrived. Its appearance appeared to have lit up the hopes and pent force of the First Legion, and Lucas noticed that the First Legion center force actually left an opening to welcome the Wolf Fang, as if they've been expecting their arrival. Then, an embarrassing and awkward scene followed right after their arrival. Lucas's side suddenly realized that they can't use their power anymore. Leave them all here. Han roared. TL. It means, they won't be leaving, and after this battle, their bodies will be left here. In Han's eyes, when the enemy's ace cards all gathered to attack Long Chuan, it was not a crisis but rather the crucial turning point he was waiting for. He had been waiting for the enemies to show all their ace cards at once. Han clearly remembered what Long Chuan was telling him before the war. The Wolf Fang couldn't be used as a last resort card but instead as a trump card that was designed to kill the enemy's ace cards. The violent attacks immediately unfolded. The Wolf Fang squad and all their brothers in the center all started charging like crazy. They gave up attacking the enemy ranged troops and began to focus everything to get the heads of Lucas and other enemy aces. Only one goal. No matter the price they had to pay, they will kill this group of the strongest outlaws on the battlefield. Within the 10 meters radius void domain, it was the most brutal and most violent battleground. Inside the void domain, all powers were taken away, and even the ranged ability attacks wouldn't be able to get into the domain, so melee brutality was the only way. If they did not have the void domain, could the First Legion kill someone as powerful as Lucas? Maybe, but they were bound to pay a painful price. After all, Lucas's level was too high, and his power was already strong to begin with. But now, Lucas entered the void domain, his famous thunder descent superpower had been robbed and couldn't be used anymore, leaving him no choice but to fight these violent warriors from Earth in melee combat. On Earth's side, the soldiers used their bodies to stop the blows of the enemy aces and traded blows with their life on the line. A life for a life, even 3 or 4 lives for a life was also worth it for them. All in all, now that you guys are here, you guys won't be leaving anymore. Full-on violence, it was originally just Han's own style of combat, but now has spread throughout the entire Legion. Void End was activated with Han as the center, so he must always follow Lucas, biting into his flesh and never letting go. After all, Lucas was an intermediate 5-star elite, his power source index was close to 600,000. Even without his superpower, his combat strength was still very powerful. In a blink of an eye, 7 or 8 warriors from Earth were smashed into the ground by Lucas. Although Lucas also received several cuts himself, but with his advanced combat suit and even stronger source energy, none of the wounds were life-threatening. There was a good old saying. To catch bandits you must first catch the ringleader. If we could kill Lucas in one swoop, then we could end this difficult battle and end all hopes for the enemies. Anyways, Lucas must die. He was the biggest threat to Earth, and to our brothers. I'm taking your life. Stepping on the corpses of brothers, Han charged, waving his silver moon crescent blade, biting onto Lucas and started trading blows with him. Lucas had a higher level, but Han had stronger equipment. Lucas had a pinnacle 5-star combat suit named the Lucky Sirius, but Han had the junior 6-star combat suit, Black Kylan, forged with soft metal. Lucas used a pair of black crystal titanium swords, Crosswind, but Han had the Fremont, TL. Previously translated as Folin, Dragon Titanium Forged Scimitar, Silver Moon Crescent Blade. On the battlefield, an unbelievable scene appeared. Han and Lucas were trading blows with each other, slashing back and forth. Then, the tide of battle tipped. This scene left everyone stunned with eyes staring and mouth opened. With crimson-red eyes, Han actually was the one that chased the Lucas who was a lot higher level than him, and Lucas kept on trying to run but he would still occasionally turn around to try to kill Han. Han's blood was already boiling, he was very excited, and it was an unprecedented feeling of excitement. Honestly, Long Chuan had already done a good enough job, he fully grasped and controlled the situation even though the First Legion was on the inferior side. But there were those damn elite outlaws. If Lucas didn't die, then all his brothers will die. Kill him. Kill him. Must kill him at all cost. The voice constantly ringed inside Han's brain, with a rapid acceleration of blood flow and heart rate, the Han that was madly slashing seemed to have triggered a hidden existence of some sort inside his body. Darkness began to spread from the position of Han's heart, quickly spreading to Han's arm, turning his right arm black, and then it even spread to half of Han's face and his eye. Are you really a human or demon? Lucas shouted angrily at Han. Now, the Han that appeared in Lucas's eyes was extremely terrifying, his entire right face turned completely black, especially Han's right eye, bleak without any light reflecting. The Han that transformed into a being half covered in darkness. Could it be because of that half of the heart of darkness that he absorbed before? Chapter 63. Darkness Awakened. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Power, endless power. With Han slowly transforming into a being of darkness, his power was growing at an extraordinary rate. In the past, Han tried to overdose himself with lots of drugs and after swallowing 10 times the normal dosage, Han became almost invincible and could even single-handedly go against enemies 10 times his strength. However, this was fundamentally different. Han felt that the power originating from the darkness was more substantial, it was like a power that belonged only to him. On the other hand, the power gained through drugs was comparably more unreliable, which faded away after the drugs' effects passed. The darkness not only brought Han tremendous power, but also the Eye of Darkness. Now, when Han's eyes looked at Lucas's body, he could clearly see the paths of Lucas's source energy flow, the 0-degree brain region that was rapidly working, and even the enemy's bone marrow. Kill him! Kill him! I must kill him! Han shouted internally louder and louder. It was unbelievable. The half-dark transformed Han was like a god of war descending from above, and began to chase and attack Lucas like a madman. Boom boom. As Han's strength rapidly increased, his handling of the silver moon crescent blade also became more and more fierce, aiming straight at Lucas's combat suit, leaving behind clearer and clearer marks. The cuts were deeper and deeper. As this continues, Lucas's defense will undoubtedly fall apart sooner or later. I want your life. Inspired by the energy of darkness, Han suddenly shouted and slashed down with full power. Gincy. This time, there was actually the sight of blood. Han violently tore apart Lucas's combat suit, and he began to slice through flesh and chop up bones. Han's killing intent became larger and larger, cuts after cuts landed on Lucas's body, and Lucas's originally tall and big figure became smaller and smaller, into smaller and small pieces. Violence. An unimaginable degree of violence. The head of all evil, the chief of the Thorn Birds gang, Lucas was cut into pieces, by the hands of Han. Cut into pieces while he was still alive. You all need to die. Immediately turning around, Han stared with his black right eye and shouted. Combining both the void end and the power of darkness produced devastating attacks that were capable of eliminating the last glimmer of hope from the remnants of the outlaws. Han's attacks were basically two steps. First, take away all the enemy's powers. Second, use the powerful strength of the darkness and annihilate the enemies to the last one. Whoever dares to blocks me, die. Gincy. Almost one hit one kill, Han charged straight into the enemy crowd using his brutal and merciless attacks and sliced through all the enemies in front of him. Boom. Suddenly, Han opened up a path of blood. His speed was incredible and even his comrades in the Wolf Fong squad were left far behind. What if he accidentally went too far and missed someone? Of course he would just turn around, and kill the on his way back. The Atlantic cruiser, medical cabin. The war was already over. Long Chuan laid on his deathbed, looking at Han that was busy by his side. Originally, Long Chuan didn't intend on going back to Earth alive. He knew that he didn't have much time, and being able to contribute to Earth one last time was his greatest wish. However, things didn't progress as Long Chuan originally planned, and the Long Chuan that had already decided to sacrifice himself was saved by Han. Originally, Long Chuan wanted to detonate his 0-degree brain region and die with Lucas and the other aces of the Outlaw Alliance. However, before Long Chuan even got the chance to, Han sprang right out, chasing and killing. He even chopped Lucas into pieces while he was still alive as well as killing countless enemies, fully displaying his potential as a super executioner. So Long Chuan didn't die, he just passed out due to a drug overdose. Han read Night Walker's pharmacology book, and had Long Chuan take 6 0-degree joy pills. Miraculously, Long Chuan slowly came back to life again. As well, Han seemed to have returned to normal. The black color that was on his face and arm had already receded. He was back to normal now, with that friendly and humble smile on his face again. The contrast was really huge. Just now, everyone witnessed how Han turned from a soldier into a demon and how he killed more enemies than the rest of the Wolf Fong squad combined. The deep cuts and traces of blood on his black Kylan combat suit was the best proof. Come on, let's drink this. Han melted a couple of pills and fed it to Long Chuan. Without the proper machines, Han can only use the emergency measures he read from that book. Gudong, TL. Sound of drinking, Long Chuan thought for a bit, and then he drank the entire bowl of bitter medicine as instructed by Han, and continued to use strange eyes to stare at Han, as if he was looking at a monster. Don't look at me, I don't know what happened either. I was just really mad back then, and that seemed to have triggered some sort of power that I had never experienced before, that's all. Han tried to explain to Long Chuan why he suddenly erupted. Long Chuan nodded, and didn't say anything else. At this time, Long Chuan's 3 deputies arrived. Osman was the vice-captain of the Atlantic, while Soros and Wu Qingfeng were the deputy army chiefs of 1st Legion. All 3 of them were injured, but they don't care at all and seemed really excited. Osman clenched his fist and said, "Chief, the record's out. The Atlantic and Special Tactical Troops destroyed 24 battleships, seized 4 destroyers and 7 frigates. After this war, now we have 12 battleships. Now we can really claim to have a fleet with a pretty good combat strength." Wu Qingfeng immediately said, "For the ground war, we lost 2,389 soldiers, but our legion annihilated more than 15,000 enemy soldiers. It's an unimaginably huge victory." Long Chuan felt that this victory is worth celebrating. He was just going to say some words of celebration, but suddenly he noticed that Han slightly frowned. Curious, Long Chuan asked, "Han, the result of our victory has finally come out. Our brothers fought a hard battle and they are not quite tired. I want to give order to clean up the battlefield and return to Earth for a rest. What do you think? We can't go back now." Han was anxious and he blurted out. Long Chuan and his 3 deputies all looked curiously at Han. Long Chuan asked sincerely, "Why not return to Earth? You made a significant contribution this war and everyone saw it. There's no outsider in this room, so relax and speak boldly." Han nodded and said, "Although the battle's already over, but these raiders and pirates all have their own base. If we leave them, they will come back and seek revenge for sure. If I'm the commander, I would lead the brothers that can still fight and head straight to the enemy base. We will cut the grass and remove the roots for complete eradication. As for here, we just need to leave behind a small troop enough to clean the battlefield and then send all the wounded soldiers back home. After all these years living outside of the law, these raiders and pirates must be hiding a good amount of wealth. In the past they robbed us. Now it's our turn to rob them. As for the enemies that were left back home, we need to deliver a fatal blow. We need to kill them all. Rob everything. Lastly, we will incinerate the enemy's lair." Osman slightly hesitated and whispered, "You know that this is the 3-all policy, TL. Kill all, take all, and destroy all. After all, we, the Earth Federation, are still a lawful country, and the Milky Way's law of preferential treatment of prisoners still apply here. F***K that rule." Han immediately retorted, "The Atlantic and all those battleships we robbed from the enemies all need repair when we go back, and all the soldiers' equipment need change and repair. As well, the Earth's Federation needs to expand the Esper Legion scale, and all of these need money. As long as Earth can safely endure through this time of crisis, I don't care about any rules. Instead of just guarding our C-class mine and make the small change, I prefer grabbing more. We should drive our fleet to the enemy's lair and start robbing right away. Time is running out. If the enemies get the message that their main force were all annihilated, then it will be too late. Tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. They dare to kill our citizens, then we will annihilate their entire clan." Long Chuan and the others were all awed by Han's words. For them, this battle's victory was good enough to let them feel satisfied. But Han felt like that was not enough, and he could only feel satisfied if they drove directly into the enemy's lair and stomped them into the ground. Long Chuan thought for a moment, and gestured Han to leave first, so Han turned around and exited the room, leaving only Long Chuan and his 3 deputies there. Han's only 17. Long Chuan sighed deeply, and said with some emotion, "Now that Earth has young people like Han to protect, even if I die I can rest in peace." Osman nodded. Han's personality is cruel, but yet very warranted. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even realize that we could take advantage of this opportunity and storm the enemy's lair. So, what should we do? Long Chuan's eyes briefly scanned across his 3 deputies. His eyes suddenly became cold, and he said in a deep voice, "Do what Han said. Gather the brothers and we will immediately move out to wipe out their lair." On a little unknown planet in the Milky Way, Night Walker sat in his office, slightly frowned, and gently adjusted his glasses. For some reason, Night Walker's right eyelid had been jumping for the entire day today, and it was making him feel uneasy, as if there was something on his mind. Night Walker stood up from his chair, and started pacing back and forth in the middle of his office. Could it be something happened? Night Walker scratched his chin and said to himself. There was a row of bookshelves in his office. He stopped in front of them and gently pressed a button hidden behind a shelf. After his identity was verified, the bookshelf automatically moved aside and revealed a hidden safe in the wall. Night Walker opened the cabinet and checked the items inside one by one. Some represented the badges of glories from his past, some were his hand-written notes, and there was a small rosewood box, placed in the bottom of the safe. When Night Walker picked up that little box, his hands slightly shivered. The patterns on that wooden box were ancient yet still clear, emitting an indescribable aura, and the box itself was actually shaking in a very rhythmic way. Night Walker began to get nervous, his heartbeat accelerated, and clear veins appeared on his forehead. He quickly opened this mysterious rosewood box. The inside was covered with red velvet, and embedded inside was half a heart, or an unknown object that really looked like half of a human heart. At this moment, this black and mysterious heart-shaped object was actually beating. It was even a rhythmic beat. As if it was revived. Plop plop. Chapter 64. Sally Empire's Deadly Trap. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the Sagittarius constellation was the Sally Empire Palace. There were countless countries that wanted to colonize Earth, but the Sally Empire was the closest and was also one that showed its ugliest side to reach its goal. They didn't even bother hiding their greed, playing underhanded tactics one after another, and they even hired raiders and pirates to harass the small and weak planet of Earth. Sally Empire's incumbent king was called Figaro the 149th. After experiencing 149 generations, the imperial throne was passed on to the King Figaro, who had a pair of sinister slits for eyes. The empire wasn't as powerful and resourceful in comparison to the true giants of the Milky Way, but it still had thousands of years of tradition and counted as a veteran figure in the Milky Way, way stronger than the developing nation of Earth. After a dissolute night, King Figaro waited until noon to get up. Although his height reached 1.9 meters and he was regarded a big guy, he already depleted his body early with wine and women. If it wasn't for the help of some drugs, he couldn't even satisfy the two little seductive chicks last night. Thinking back to last night with his favorite twins, the king's face was full with pride. But he wouldn't favor that pair of twins again, because he was the king, the most distinguished king in the empire, and anything the king used are now old and should be thrown away. The king only wears new clothes, and sleeps with new women. Half lying on the sofa, the servants carried over a hearty breakfast as well as today's newspaper. Seeing the headline of today's paper, King Figaro was immediately shocked, and his eyes suddenly opened wide. This was a standard Milky Way daily newspaper, titled, "Small Earth's Fighting Force Bursting Off the Chart, Wiping Out the Stronger Raiders and Annihilated More Than 15,000 Outlaws." Reading the content, King Figaro was so angry that his bearded face became distorted, and the reporter writing this story emphasized that Earth was just a very small country in the entire Milky Way, with an entire army barely over 13,000 soldiers. But just with this small army and Earth's only battlecruiser, Earth's united government completed the annihilation of a large portion of the active raiders and pirates in the 57th sector of Milky Way. King Figaro smacked the paper down on the face of a young girl who was just serving him breakfast, and the pretty girl was so scared that her whole body trembled and she almost started crying on the spot. Then, Figaro picked up the second newspaper. It was a reputable newspaper in the Milky Way, called the Daily Milky Way. The Daily Milky Way actually also had an article on that battle on the front page, and they reported from a very interesting point of view. Starting from a report on the previous Milky Way meets Galactic. He left the world with the impression that he wasn't just a powerful warrior, but also someone with an unyielding will who, in a situation with no helping hands, finished alone in 9th place when fighting in the A7 extinction domain, wowing the entire Milky Way galaxy. Daily Milky Way felt, Galactic might not be an exception. Maybe the tiny and distant planet Earth perhaps are filled with warriors with similar unyielding wills. Otherwise, it was impossible to explain how Earth, with such a weak army, was able to eliminate an enemy much stronger than them. What pissed Figaro off more was that the Daily Milky Way listed several countries in the 57th sector that failed to eliminate these criminals for years, and rather a small and developing Earth was able to, thus leaving the Daily Milky Way to question what the developed countries, including the Sally Empire, were doing. King Figaro flew into rage, tore the newspaper into pieces and threw it onto the desk. The waiting servants hurried to clean up, but they ended up receiving kicks after kicks from the pig. Like fat Figaro. "Get me Levi!" Figaro shouted. The servants hastily went to summon the Empire Chancellor, Levi, while King Figaro still raged silently in his chair, picking up the third newspaper. This was the Globe Star News published in Sally Empire, and it had always served as a henchman for the Sally Empire, always complimenting how much of a saint King Figaro was, and its choice of words were always as flattering as possible. Globe Star News didn't put the news about Earth on the front page but on the far more irrelevant third page. Unfortunately, King Figaro took a closer look at the content and he became even more mad than before. Globe Star News really couldn't find any arguments to attack Earth, so they actually talked about how cruel the Earth Federation was to kill more than 15,000 outlaws and also destroying their home, completely wiping out their lairs and setting everything on fire. There actually existed a teammate stupid like a pig. The Globe Star News actually wrote the news from the perspective of sympathy for the criminals. That's called being politically incorrect, okay? Even fools know how much the people hated the Star Pirates and Raiders. How could the dignified imperial voice speak on behalf of these criminals? Now the entire Milky Way was talking about the satisfaction of eliminating all those bandits, and the Globe Star News was sympathizing with the criminals. Originally, the Sally Empire's ass wasn't clean, and now the Globe Star News was showing how depressed and bitter they were when the pirates and raiders were killed by Earth. Wasn't that slapping the Empire's face with its own hands? Crash. King Figaro flipped the entire table. The hot soup poured onto several female servants' faces and burned them. Not only did Figaro not care, but he also added a few more kicks in order to release his anger. At this moment, the Chancellor of the Sally Empire, Levi, arrived. This man with red curly hair was called the Fox of the Sally Empire, and he was also the king's most trusted think tank. Seeing the mess inside the room, Levi frowned and ordered all the servants to get out. He paid a deep salutation to King Figaro and said, "Your Majesty, surely you are angry because of the Earth Federation things, right?" Figaro snappily replied, "Damn that impotent Lucas. You go contact all the raiders from other Milky Way sectors. No matter how much money need to be spent, I want to get Earth down to its knees." Levi shook his head and said, "Your Majesty, at this critical stage, all the major medias in Milky Way are paying attention to the 57th sector. There are already rumors about us hiring those bandits, and if we continue to do so then our plan will be debunked." Figaro stared with his eyes wide open and shouted, "Are you trying to persuade me to quit?" "Impossible. Whatever I want must always be mine. Originally, I was okay with leaving the citizens alive after we colonize Earth, but now I wish I could kill every damn living soul on that damn planet. Let them be man, women or kids. How dare they fight back? Now none of them should even think about living." Levi smiled, "I agree. Our empire already has a huge population, the 15 billion people on Earth will simply be our burden. Kill or sell to slavery are all good options. But, Your Majesty, this means that we have to change our method a bit. Now that the Milky Way meet is happening soon, we can't leave a bad impression to the 12 permanent members of the Milky Way Alliance. I think we can split this operation into 2 steps. First, we have to find allies, whether it's someone in the 57th sector or one of the 12 permanent members of the Milky Way Alliance. We need to try to convince them to support our proposal of colonizing Earth. It might take a lot of money, but there's a B.class relic, aka extinction domain, on Earth. As long as we capture that relic, its output will certainly be more than our investment. In addition, fostering good relationships with other planets can only be advantageous for us with no harms. Secondly, of course we need to teach those people on Earth a lesson. They still have a couple contestants left in the Milky Way meat exam, so let's get all of them eliminated so that they don't have a single qualified contestant to compete in the final Milky Way meet. That's going to be a really hard slap in the face for Earth, a country that couldn't even get a single spot at the meet. Earth will be the largest joke in the Milky Way. A disgrace. King Figaro was shocked and he suddenly slapped his desk and said, "What a good strategy. Put out a reward, focus on anyone from Earth that's attending the meet and eliminate them all. We will let the entire Milky Way witness Earth's incompetence." Levi smiled and echoed, "Your Majesty is very wise. The contestants from Earth attending the Milky Way meet's preliminaries are chosen elites from that planet, and we will smack them all to death, and that will be equivalent to slapping Earth right in the face." King Figaro laughed and said in a deep voice, "Hurry and make the arrangement, kill all the soldiers from Earth that are in the Milky Way meet." Galactic Dark Net Han finished the mission and returned to the Nazca base. The first thing he did was to meet Pathless Origin. What happened to him during the battle was too strange. Han really wanted to find out what that inexplicable dark power was and where it came from. Arriving at the agreed virtual meeting space, Han found that Nightwalker was actually here too, and it was actually his first time meeting both mentors together. Looking at their expressions, they didn't look to be at ease and had a rather worried look. "Teacher, Mr. Knight." Han was already very familiar with them, so he immediately jumped into his question. "Something really strange happened to me. I seem to have somehow awakened some sort of dark energy. At the same time my own power was strengthened, such as my right eye became able to see a lot of strange things, as if it can completely see through the enemies. His meridians, his 0-degree brain region, all in one glance. How did that happen? That's the eye of darkness." Pathless Origin thought for a bit, and said to Nightwalker, "Old Black, you know the details, I think you should explain it." Nightwalker slightly nodded his head, pushed up his glasses and said in a deep voice, "Han, what I'm going to say next will be very strange, I want you to be mentally prepared and don't be scared by it." After taking a deep breath once, some light flashed in Nightwalker's eyes, and he said one word at a time, "All in all Han, you really hit the jackpot this time." Chapter 65. The King of Darkness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Han hesitated, and then shrugged his shoulders and said, "Come on, please don't kid me. Since the beginning I'm just a little native boy from Earth, since when did I hit the jackpot?" Nightwalker laughed, and said seriously, "Where do I start? Okay, it all began that year when the first A.class relic, A.1, was opened. At that time, although there was growing prosperity of the human race in the Milky Way, there was no Milky Way Alliance yet, only some small-scale cooperative organizations. The one that found and activated the A.1 relic was called the Blue Wave Republic, one of the dominant class empires in the Milky Way. Confident with its power, the Blue Wave Republic forcefully broke open the A.1, and spawned the disaster of the century. Just moments after the A.1 relic was opened, an unprecedentedly powerful Dark Warrior killed his way out of the relic, and that person later came to be known by the Milky Way as the Dark King. The Dark King had no name, no one knew why he appeared in A.1, all people knew was that he killed the entire exploration army from the Blue Wave Republic in one night. Then killed off all the logistics corps located in the periphery of the relic, and he possessed a powerful force of darkness that was beyond imagination. Blue Wave Republic's army came to kill the Dark King, but however many people they send, however many got killed. Not even the giant laser cannon could kill this monster that was against all heaven rules. Ultimately, the Republic of Blue Wave paid a tragic price for its bold move of opening up A.1. The elites of the entire nation were killed by the Dark King and it was never able to recover since then. And after a few hundreds of years, this country went from a Milky Way overlord of the generation to meeting its cruel fate of being mutilated by other countries. Then, the major powers of the Milky Way sent their strongest warriors in hopes to catch this monster codenamed the Dark King. Even so, they still paid a heavy price. The entire hunt went on for 120.8 years, countless casualties were recorded, and finally the Milky Way Alliance army was able to oppress the Dark King at the H975327 black hole and forced it to jump into the black hole and suicide. So, the operation to catch the Dark King came with an unimaginably high price, and not counting the heavy casualties, the cost was already an astronomical figure. After experiencing this storm, the people in the Milky Way finally realized how many hidden secrets were stored away in those relics and how scary that was. That was how the Milky Way Alliance was formed, and all A.class relics must be decided by the Milky Way Alliance about whether and when they should explore it. Without any exaggeration, the powerful Milky Way Alliance was originally just an alliance to hunt for the Dark King. Think about it, gathering all powers in Milky Way, just for one guy. You can probably imagine how powerful the Dark King is. Han gasped, and said in surprise, "Oh my God, the Dark King can cause chaos in the entire Milky Way just by himself, then isn't his power off the chart? But what does that powerful figure have to do with me?" Of course there's a relationship. Night Walker said in a deep voice, "At that time, the Dark King was forced to jump into a black hole and no one got to see his dead body. 367 days after the death of the Dark King, no. H975327 black hole erupted. After property reversal, the black hole turned into a white hole, and went from absorbing everything nearby to spitting out everything inside the hole. After a few hundred years, some unexplained strange objects began to appear in the Milky Way, like a hand of darkness, a heart of darkness, and all these things were found near the black hole that had originally buried the Dark King. So, gradually a legend began in Milky Way saying that after the Dark King died, his body went through some mutations that us humans wouldn't understand. Just like how the Esper soldiers can leave behind power crystals after death, the Dark King left behind some organs after death. The more times the legend got passed, the more interesting it became. In the end the legend even said that the Dark King left behind 7 things after death, and they were the heart, brain, hand, eye, bone, knee, and lastly the crystal of darkness. All these things combined, are called the 7 layers of darkness. The 7 layers are all universe treasures without exception, and countless people tried to study them in attempt to inherit the powerful strength of darkness of the king. After all, he once single-handedly fought against the entire Milky Way. This level of combat was beyond imagination. A lot stronger than any super warlords in the Milky Way. Unfortunately, human study on the 7 layers of darkness never progressed, because all 7 items were extremely toxic. Sufficient enough to melt through flesh and bone. Then, Night Walker paused for a second, and stared at Han. "I had the opportunity this life to acquire the Heart of Darkness. Although the price I paid was heavy, it's all in the past now and I don't regret it at all." Later, I met a very interesting young man. He had deadly toxins in his body but he didn't die because his unique 0-degree brain region protected this young man. So, I thought, I will just try to cure the dead horse as if it was a living horse, TL. A saying in Chinese that means the situation is already bad enough, might as well try it as if the horse is still alive. So I used half of that Heart of Darkness and made an even more toxic potion out of it and gave it to that young man to take as a medicine. Originally, I was just trying to fight fire with fire and remove the toxins in that young man, and the results looked exactly like that case. But then later, that young man went onto the battlefield, and unexpectedly triggered the great power of darkness, and that's when I suddenly realized that this young man inherited the powers of the Dark King. Then, with shining eyes, Night Walker stressed each syllable, and said, "And that young man, is you." Han was way too surprised. It turned out that he unwittingly accepted the heavenly power of the Dark King. No wonder he suddenly felt a sudden exponential growth in power after undergoing the dark transformation, and even his vision became special. So this was why. Han thought for a bit, and asked in curiosity, "Half of the Heart of Darkness already let me grow this much, then if I acquire all 7 layers of darkness, then aren't I going to be invincible?" Ginxie Night Walker and Pathless Origin almost collapsed. Pathless Origin laughed and said, "What are you little brat thinking? Just for that Heart of Darkness, we almost died. Even if you have the power to absorb all 7 layers of darkness, it's not like you can find the remaining 6 items." Han felt the same way. He was really being a little too greedy. He laughed and asked, "Speaking of absorption, how come other people can't absorb these items but I can acquire the power of darkness?" Pathless said, "This, we still don't know. Maybe it's because of the void end power that you have. Your power is Mystery Darkness Descent, and the 7 layers of darkness are essentially of the dark element as well. Maybe your power can restrain other dark class components, but I'm not too sure." In short, Old Black is right. The lucky you that already possessed the strong power of Void End, has now also acquired a portion of the power of the Dark King. You really hit the jackpot this time. Void End's disadvantage is that you rob others of their power but you don't become any stronger, but now that you have the unmeasurable power of darkness, killing enemies will only require 2 steps. First, activate your domain and deprive them of their power. Second, use the power of darkness and kill them. This combination of super abilities is fearsome just thinking about it. Han was already attracted by the bright future that Pathless Origin had described for him, but how should he train this power of darkness? Han became very confused. About that concern, Pathless had a good dismissive laugh. "You have to believe in the power of me and the Dark Net. The resources that are here are beyond your imagination. Tomorrow, we will officially enter a new round of extreme training." Han just said goodbye to Pathless and Night Walker. He was found by Li Yu and Long Chuan. Long Chuan was in his wheelchair and Li Yu pushed him. "Han, I already saw the video on the battlefield that was recorded. I'm really interested to see how high your physical power index after you transform." Li Yu saw Han and hastily asked. Han was shocked for a brief moment, shook his head and said, "I didn't try it, only strength descent espers will test their physical power index. I just periodically test my power source index." "Then let's go immediately and try," Li Yu said in a deep voice. The 3 arrived at the assessment center. There was a special test machine for the strength descent espers, the Bulls that I machine. After a punch in the center, the system will quantify the strength of that punch. "Come on, use your power of darkness and give it a punch," Li Yu said in excitement. Han nodded, and began to gather his newly acquired power. Since he was still not familiar with how to use it, it took a while for him to find that right feeling. When using the power of darkness, first the heart beat faster, then the blood pressure raised immediately, and that strong sense of power began to gather in the body. Li Yu and Long Chuan all stood aside and looked forward to watching Han. Li Yu whispered, "I'm guessing that Han's physical power index is above 2,000 kilograms. Long Chuan slightly frowned and said, "1 punch for 2,000 kilograms. It's not likely, right? He's not even strength descent." Li Yu disagreed, "We will wait and see. I'm very confident in Han's potential. Here it comes." That feeling of being full with power was rediscovered by Han. Shu Han's fist gradually turned black, and that fearsome power of darkness almost erupted out from Han. Gritting his teeth, Han alighted his fist with the bull's eye and punched at full power. What seemed to be an ordinary punch, was actually containing an unimaginable amount of dark energy. A series of dazzling lightning sparks projected out from the inside of that machine, followed by a deafening explosion sound. Li Yu and Long Chuan couldn't believe their eyes. The Bulls that I machine that specialized in the testing of power, became a piece of junk from Han's 1 punch. Oh ho ho, after such a long time, I'm finally almost done all the bonus chapters. 2 more to go. Anyways, keep the donations coming so there's daily releases. Ha 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 ha, now that the $10 opening special is gone, I don't have to clench my booty hole when I see a $50 donation from a single guy. Chapter 66. Death of Luo Yuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a seemingly long silence, Long Chuan and Li Yu finally came back to their senses. Seeing the pile of junk that was previously a bull's eye machine, the look on their faces could only be described as very interesting. Han, what have you done? Li Yu asked. Han said with an innocent face. I already said, only strength descent espers use this machine, but you guys insisted on me trying. How would I know what happened? Li Yu and Long Chuan stared at each other in silence. Crap, the only bull's eye machine was broken by Han, but exactly how powerful was Han's punch? We still don't know. Long Chuan thought for a moment, maybe it's the nature of Han's attack that's really unique, it detonated the circuitry inside the machine. But in conclusion, after this, at least we know that now Han not only has the void domain that can deprive enemy powers, he's also equipped with an incredibly strong attack. Li Yu nodded, the void end plus the power of darkness. Han, now you got a new nickname. Other than the tough bone Han, people also call you the Dark Demon because of your savage and merciless performance on the battlefield. Also, this time we got a lot of loot. Our fleet size has now expanded to 12 ships, and we also destroyed 13 raider and pirate nests and retrieved a large amount of loot from their lair. The preliminary estimate of the value from the loot is more than 2 billion GC. So, we and Talon talked a bit and decided to recruit all the qualified espers from the Federation into the army, and soon Earth will have 10 esper legions plus an excellent starship fleet. Expanding the military will also need the purchase of large quantities of supplies and equipment, so we still have to contact that mysterious friend of yours. Han nodded and said, purchasing isn't a problem. Earth is my home, and doing something for my home is my responsibility, but you know. Li Yu smiled and interrupted Han, I know, the equipment and medicines you get are either illegal or unsolicited. But it's almost time for the Milky Way meet. We can't afford to care about that anymore, so just rest assured and purchase whatever you feel fit, as long as it works. This time, other than equipment and medicine, we also need some parts for repairing starships. The Atlantic cruiser needs some serious repairs, but this time we will use our own engineers. Not to mention that it saves money, but it also trains our mechanics. The three walked and talked, discussing seriously about the military and the future of Earth. Currently, the higher-ups in the Earth military unanimously recognized Han as a very talented young man who will very likely be promoted to be one of them in the future. To this end, Long Chuan and Li Yu told Han everything they knew and didn't try to hide anything. Han also asked about Long Chuan's illness. Although he had managed to preserve Long Chuan's life, his condition did not improve and thus has to now rely on a wheelchair. Han secretly decided that he will learn more about pharmacology and see if he can help Long Chuan. After all, Long Chuan was like the soul of Earth's military, whether it was tactical or combat. Losing him will be a significant and tragic loss for Earth. They were just about to leave the training camp when the grumpy Cheng Zhong caught up and wanted to drag Han out for a drink. What happened? Who pissed you off? Han asked curiously. Don't mention it. Didn't we just get a huge victory? So I decided to take advantage of this momentum and see if I can pass the final pressure exam so I can get a spot at the Milky Way meet as soon as possible. But what the hell? Just when I entered the battle, everyone started to target me. And someone even chopped off my head. Although it was just virtual battle and I can't die, it is so **** shameful. I'm almost embarrassed enough to kill myself. Han was slightly shocked, puzzled and asked, what kind of battle exam? Why did they all target you? It was a medal race this time. Everyone had a keepsake on their chest, and you must try to get as many of other people's keepsakes as possible while protecting your own. The more you get, the higher your score. I was hiding somewhere and planning to wait for single encounters, and I saw some people fighting, so I wanted to take advantage of the chaos and try to make something happen. But, all those people stopped fighting immediately after seeing me, and they all ganged up on me. Qing Zhong said angrily. A bad feeling suddenly rose in Han, but first he tried to comfort Qing Zhong. Don't worry, maybe you just stepped in a trap. Maybe these people came from the same group and they just pretended to be fighting to bait enemies. There are still 2 more months left until the deadline for this exam, just calm down and train, you still have a chance. Fine. Qing Zhong darkened his face, nodded and said, looks like I still need to gain more weight. I'm going to go back eat until I'm at 800 pounds and then compete again. Han didn't say anything. The night wind in Nazca was very strong, blowing the sand and making it dance. No one knew, the Sally Empire had already set up a net in the pressure exam, and the trouble Qing Zhong just encountered was just a start. Luo Yuan was the youngest soldier in the training camp. She was just 16 years old and had the typical features of a southern Chinese girl. Pretty skin, a short and thin figure, 2 cute dimples when she laughed. A small girl that liked to hide in her room and watch anime while wearing pink princess dresses. Speaking of Luo Yuan and Han, they shared a common hobby. Both of them liked hot chocolate, so they always saw each other at the hot beverage section in the cafeteria. Han doubted that she weighed more than 70 pounds and thus, he could easily lift her up with one finger. Although knowing that Luo Yuan was a relatively rare sound descent esper and was quite talented, Han felt that someone as shy as Luo Yuan wasn't suitable to become a soldier. Today, he walked into the training camp like usual and saw Luo Yuan again, but her originally pair of big and cutie's eyes were pink like peaches from crying. She carried a shoulder bag covered with plush toys, and was on her way out under Nbebe's company. Seeing Han, Luo Yuan bit her lips to try not to cry, but tears still fell like beads from a broken string. She bowed deeply at Han and said quietly, Brother Han, thank you for taking care of me, goodbye. Han was not prepared. He was stunned for a second and then replied goodbye. Qing Zhong came into the lobby after Han, and Luo Yuan also bowed to him and whispered goodbye. What happened? The confused Han asked Qing Zhong. Qing Zhong had a bitter face, sighed and said, Little Yuan was eliminated, so she's leaving the training camp to report to the administration. Still don't know where they will send this little girl, she's too timid and shy. At this moment, Nbebe comforted Luo Yuan by the door for a bit, turned around and returned to the lobby and said to Han, Little Yuan is really pitiful, not only was she eliminated, those people even uploaded the video of her head getting cut off onto the internet. She's just 16 and is still immature, that's just simply too much for her. Han was shocked and asked, there's such a thing? Show me. Nbebe nodded and took Han to the front of a computer, and then booted on to the Milky Way's largest video site and searched out a video. Inside the clip, a bunch of espers from other planets were sieging the tiny Luo Yuan, and little Yuan was obviously very frightened. Such a little girl getting surrounded by 7 to 8 sturdy men, they not only beat little Yuan but also insulted her with vulgar language. Han could not help but clench his fists, damn those guys. Little Yuan suddenly opened her mouth and erupted a series of fatal syllables. Sound descent espers all relied on the release of sonic waves to attack, and it was said that once they reach a certain level, they could release noises that can trap the enemies in illusion. Although it was not some strong power, it was still a very useful niche skill. Little slut, how dare you resist? Watch me tear apart your mouth. A big guy wasn't expecting how strong little Yuan's counterattack was, and became very dizzy from the booming sonic shock with blood constantly flowing out of his ears. He angrily punched Luo Yuan's little face with his fist, and the sweet dimple on little Yuan's face was flattened. Her pink little cheek was swollen up, and some other fellow on the side stepped on little Yuan and laughed out loud. Shua the brawny warrior took out a reverse astral blade, raised it high up into the air and aligned it with little Yuan's white neck. At this moment, she was already in a mess from all the beatings, how could she have the power to resist? She just stared blankly into the sky, her eyes were devoid of hope. Go to hell. The brawny soldier shouted and swung the sharp knife in his hand. Shua Han could no longer stand it, a punch landed on the computer screen and completely shattered it. That's way out of the line. Even it was a virtual battle, Han could still feel the rage inside of him like a fire. She was just 16, she was only a weak little girl, are those guys animals? Ching Zhong was angry on the side as well, what the hell, it was my first metal game and I also met a group of guys that all want to take my head as if they already had some agreement before. And Bebe gritted her teeth and said in a deep voice, do you know what's more cruel? If you lose your first metal game, you still have a second chance, but the second game was even more brutal for little Yuan. Shua flames of anger burst out of Han's eyes, he turned around and looked at Nbebe. Nbebe said sullenly, if useless to look at me this way. After you were back you were so focused on training and didn't have the time to communicate with everyone. Within just a month, there are only 18 guys left in the training camp, even Parker was eliminated. He also got his head cut off and the videos up online as well. Han was suddenly shocked, Parker was the 4th-ranked pro in the training camp, nicknamed Violent Temper Parker. Even he got eliminated. That's... Nbebe paused, and continued, now Earth is a joke in the pressure exam, and someone even made a website that has all the abuse and beheading videos of Luo Yuan and Parker and the others, called the Pig Butchering Assembly. It's obvious, someone deliberately wants us dead. Nbebe whispered. Chapter 67. Completely annihilated. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Han has spent 9 hours training in the extremely cold pool in his training room. This has already reached double from the past, and Han still didn't have the thought to stop. With fewer and fewer people left in the training camp, Han started to feel increasing pressure. He did not flinch in the face of pressure but chose more crazy training methods to improve himself. Today, the two significant differences compared to the extreme training in the past was that, aside from practicing the 46 ensemble, Han also spent more time practicing how to summon that special dark power and be able to control it during combat. The other change was pathless origin. This strange old man's interest in Han was growing every day. He told Han to open the big screen when training, and he always stared at Han and frequently had conversations with Han, pointing out tips for better results. Huayr Han stood in the 200 degrees Celsius unfrozen cold water. His body was covered in fog and he was breathing heavily. In such cold temperatures, even if Han didn't move at all, every minute and every second was still a torture, requiring a lot of energy and determination to adhere to. In comparison to half a month ago, Han's body went through significant changes. The extreme training didn't make Han bullier, he was still a bit slim, but his bones and muscles were significantly stronger, like a blood-red steel frame. Just finishing a round of 46 ensembles, Han was adjusting himself. Pathless slightly frowned and said, the next round is a match practice. I found you a good opponent, a wanted criminal from the Kuei race. You are probably familiar with the physical characteristics of people from the Kuei race, they have hard scales and their limbs are a lot more developed than humans. Their explosive power is very outstanding as well. In addition, he came from an assassin clan. Very good at hiding and then surprise attacking. If you are not careful, he only needs one combo to rip open your body with his sharp fingers. Pathless made very good use of the Dark Net. Every day he would find some strange people to fight against Han. Wanted criminals, assassins, underground boxers, anyway none of them were good men. They were all a bunch of ruthless guys. According to Pathless, when Han adapts to the most vicious opponents in the Milky Way and then fights those soldiers that went through the regular military training, then he will find their attacks to be very childish. Definitely not on the level of those wanted and experienced outlaws from the Dark Net. The fact has already been proved, these guys that Pathless recruited really used some insidious moves. Including methods like secretly drugging Han, creating illusions of a few naked girls to seduce Han, etc. In short, these guys do not seem to understand the concept of regular combat. They did whatever underhanded and crafty things they could in order to win. In the beginning, Han lost a lot, but after facing these people more and more, Han began to really adapt to these cunning moves, and he occasionally used some of tricks he learned as well, returning the favor. Under Pathless Origin's mentorship, Han went further and further on this not-so-decent road, and learned lots of guileful techniques. Seeing how Han didn't react, Pathless frowned and continued, "I know you aren't satisfied, but everything has its gradual process. In combat, what matters is the overall character, training, experience, battle mentality and fighting will. You can't lack any of them. So hurry up, aside from fighting one-on-one against that assassin from the Kuei race, you still have to go watch the death broadcast. That's also a very important lesson." Han took 2 deep breaths, opened his mouth and asked, "Teacher, it's getting closer and closer to the Milky Way meet, when can I start learning martial art? When can I go take my final test for the pressure exam?" Pathless said sincerely, "That's not urgent. If you want to go far, then you need better foundations, and right now is the time to lay your foundations. You can learn martial art slowly later on, but a foundation that's not solid is fatal. As for the last stage for the pressure exam, as long as you are on time you can do it right before the deadline. The situation is very clear right now, someone's targeting the contestants from Earth, so you better wait until you have the absolute certainty to win before attending the final stage." Nodded his head, Han said in a deep voice, "Got it, I will do one more darkness training, and then I will go greet that opponent from the Kuei race." Shwa right after he finished, Han suddenly submerged himself under the freezing water. "Eye of Darkness, activate." Han said on the inside. He suddenly opened his right eye. At the moment, his right eye has been completely turned into a deep black color, like a ghost reflecting dismal light. There were only 3 days left before the deadline to the pressure exam. Han still didn't appear in the final test but isolated himself in the base and practiced like mad. Every day Han had to do extreme training for 10 hours, spending 1 hour to fight the soldier that Pathless found for him, and then spend another one analyzing that day's combat, followed by another 8 hours of non-stop death broadcast viewing, checking out how the soldiers from other planets fought and thinking about what he would do during that fight. When Han last appeared in the base, he saw 2 guys, Xian Beige and Qingzhong. Those 2 were not training, but rather sitting in the lobby waiting for Han, standing beside their luggage. Han's heart suddenly thumped once. Now the training camp has become so empty, leaving only the 3 of them here. Could Xian Beige and Qingzhong be? After walking to them, Han sat down facing them, and whispered, "Are you guys leaving?" The always optimistic Qingzhong let out a long sigh and said with a bitter smile, "I'm just someone that's bored. Staying here for this long was just to accompany you for longer. After all, we both came from China, you will always be my good brother. Unfortunately, time is almost up. What's coming will come, and what's leaving will leave. You still remember Monk? That Baldy was eliminated early, and now he's actually an instructor at the 3rd Legion, leading about 100 men. Now that it's impossible for me to make it to the Milky Way meet anyways, I might as well leave early to join the military. Otherwise if I can't get a rank higher than that Monk guy, then it would be really embarrassing." Han didn't know what was better to say so he just nodded and said, "The military's job is very important too. It's good to join them as soon as possible." The 3 awkwardly sat there in silence. Qingzhong and Xian Beige both knew after they leave, Han will be the only one in the entire training camp, and he will be the last hope of Earth to get a spot at the meet. 10 years ago, Earth had just joined the Milky Way alliance under very difficult conditions. There were still 4 soldiers including, Kulake in the lead, that had made it to the meet. After 10 years of careful preparation, Earth gathered the most promising young espers early together and invested heavily in training them, yet today they were almost all eliminated. It's clear how disappointed everyone was. And if Han gets eliminated too, then the Earth Federation will really become a joke for the entire Milky Way. Xian Beige had a bitter face and was rubbing his hands non-stop, as if he had something to say but didn't know how to open his mouth. Han tried to break the awkward silence and whispered, Xian Beige, are you going to the military with Qingzhong? I heard that the Extinction Site Administration really hoped that you would go there. Schwa. Contrary to Han's expectations, Xian Beige suddenly grabbed Han's hands and began to shiver. The tall and native German, Xian Beige, began to cry, and said with tears in his eyes, Han, I'm sorry. When you had just arrived to the camp, I wasn't nice to you. Now that I think about it, I'm such a dumb pig. Han was shocked for a bit, patted Xian Beige on the shoulder and said, it's all in the past, now we are all brothers. Xian Beige heavily nodded his head, looked at Han's eyes, and said sincerely, I spent more than a decade training as hard as I could, day and night. No matter how difficult it was and how much I bled, I didn't care at all. It was just so that I could be a soldier like Kolake, and offer my share of contributions to Earth. But I'm useless. I got eliminated in the preliminary like a retard, and I don't have another chance anymore, but you still do. Please, make it to the final. No matter how small of a country Earth is, if none of US can make it to the final, then it's a shame. It's a shame for everyone. Qingzhong sighed on the side and grasped Xian Beige's shoulder. He broke down in tears as well as he started to drag Xian Beige towards the door, muttering, Han, don't listen to him, this guy's just too nervous. Go, we are all brothers, how can we not trust you? As long as you tried your best, no one's going to say anything. Han was stunned, watching Qingzhong drag the suffering Xian Beige out the door. Didn't we agree to say farewell to him happily and not give him any pressure? What were you doing? Liu, Talon, Long Chuan, they are all frantic and you don't see them talking to Han right. We can't place such a huge pressure on Han's shoulders, that's not fair for him. Out the door, Qingzhong wiped Xian Beige's eyes for him, and tossed him into a military jeep he had prepared. Xian Beige covered his face with his hands, nodded and said, I know, but I just couldn't help it. If we are all eliminated from the finals, then the Alliance will allow someone to colonize Earth for sure. If I can't even protect my home, how can I face my mother in heaven? Before my mom passed away, I promised her that I will become an outstanding soldier. Useless, I'm so useless. Xian Beige cried out loud, forcefully pulling his blonde hair. Since the beginning, he was always a proud warrior and he had kept that firm image in the training camp as well as on the battlefield. Now, it appears that perhaps everyone has their own vulnerability, but it was just that they haven't reached that point of sadness. Han looked around at the once crowded camp. There were 49 young soldiers from all over the world, the big-mouthed Qingzhong, the Luo Yuan that was like a cat, the hot-tempered Parker, the slender legs and Bebe, Nicholas from Siberia who really liked vodka. Suddenly, everyone's gone, and Han was the only one left now. Pushing open the door to the training room, Han logged onto the dark net, and found Pathless to be already waiting for him. Smiled, a touch of coldness flashed through Pathless Origin's eyes, today's the last training session before you attend the last stage of that pressure exam, and it's also the most important class. You have spent an entire 6 months on basic training, and now I hope you can learn this martial art in one day. Chapter 68. Back to the spotlight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Learn a martial art in one day. Han stared at Pathless Origin skeptically and whispered, Teacher, do you have a fever? The 46 ensemble, which is like the most basic out of the basics, you told me to practice it for a full 6 months, but now you want me to learn a more esoteric martial art. You actually want me to learn it in one day. Pathless Origin laughed out loud, that's right, you only need 1 day anyways. Now that you have a solid foundation, you must remember martial arts are not something you learn and master in the training room, but on the battlefield. Today, you just need to remember the things I teach you. As to what extent this martial art will take you, it will depend on your own comprehension. Han nodded and seriously said, okay. Pathless stroked his short beard, took out a dark memory chip, and a glimpse of coldness flashed in his eyes. Today the martial art style I will teach you is called the Star Break Fist. One punch that can break stars. Han was slightly shocked. Pathless Origin said proudly, yes, that's right. The thing in my hand is the last memory chip of this martial art style in the entire Milky Way. It was extracted from some relic. The old Night Walker gave you half a heart of darkness, how can I lose to him? I will give you this limited edition Star Break Fist, because it's no use for me anyways. After about an hour, Han walked out of the virtual reality pod in confusion. The technology of the Milky Way galaxy was very advanced. Things like learning martial art could directly be done through the format of data transmission into the brain, and Han already remotely accepted the techniques of the Star Break Fist style in the virtual reality pod. At the moment, Han felt like his brain was as chaotic as muddy water, as if someone suddenly stuffed a lot of random things into it. Returning to the training room, Pathless smiled and asked, how do you feel about this martial art technique? Han pondered for a moment and said, the Star Break Fist seems to be not just a set of boxing techniques, but a fighting style that can also go really well with weapons. It's just that, I need more experience with it to be more conclusive. Pathless slightly nodded, seems like he's quite satisfied with Han's understanding so far, and he said, not bad, now do it once in front of me. So, Han began to practice what he just learned, but what happened was totally unexpected. In theory, inheriting martial art styles through memory chips means that the techniques should be engraved in his brain already, but Han just made a few moves and he already forgot what's next. Don't think. Use your intuition. Find a way to make up for what you don't remember. Pathless was very strict and he shouted. Although the relationship between this strange old man and Han already improved a lot, but for all the crucial moments, he still couldn't suppress that hot temper of his. Han was embarrassed. He wouldn't say that he was a genius, but he knew that at least he didn't have any trouble memorizing stuff. Night Walker gave a pharmacology book to him before which information on tens of thousands of drugs and Han memorized them all. How come he just can't remember these Star Break Fist techniques? Wait, what? After completely a so quality set of Star Break, Han frowned as he tried to remember those techniques that was transmitted into his brain. Don't think. Practice again for me. If you forget, make up your own moves. Han was shocked, and he quickly began to practice for the second time, but this time it was even worse. At first, he could still remember about half of the moves, but not it wasn't even a third. For the majority of the time, Han needed to rely on his intuition to make up for the gaps between moves. Han was very anxious, he felt like he became stupid or something. He couldn't even remember a few moves. After he was done, he started practicing for the third time and the situation did not get better. This time, he forgot about 75%. After the third time around, Pathless asked Han to practice for the fourth time, and Han just felt a crazy wave of dizziness. He finally got to remember some moves, but in the blink of an eye he already forgot 90% of it. After all, the Star Break Fist was something precious that came out of the extinction domain, and it was already an extremely rare opportunity to acquire such a top-level martial art. How did he forget it in the blink of an eye? Han felt a sudden urge to cry but had no tears. And Pathless, that strange old man, was still telling Han to practice and practice. And the more he practiced the more he forgot, the more he forgot the more nervous he got, and the more nervous he got the more he forgot. In the blink of an eye, 10 hours passed by. Han's body was covered in sweat. He had already gone through the routine 17 times, and just when Pathless shouted at Han to make him practice one more time, Han stood there like a wooden chicken and didn't even make a move. Why aren't you practicing? Pathless strictly asked. Han shook his head, grimaced and said, I think, I forgot it all. You really forgot it all? Yep. Forgot it all. Like, nothing left. Yep, not a single move. Ha 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 ha. Han was 100% sure that no one's laugh was creepier than Pathless Origins. Han raised his head and curiously looked at the strange old man. After laughing crazily, Pathless Origin's eyes became cold again, and he said seriously to Han, "Congratulations, you learned Star Break Fist." Han couldn't believe his ears. "I forgot it all, and you said I learned it." Pathless nodded, "Yes, this set of technique is designed to let you forget. You don't remember all the moves, but you still remember the essence and unique features of this set of techniques, right?" Han thought about it. "I think the essence of the Star Break Fist style is attack. On Earth we have a saying, use softness to counter toughness, but Star Break is the exact opposite. It emphasizes that attack is the best defense, and if the enemy is tough, then you have to be tougher than the enemy. As for technique, Star Break is about high flexibility, fast pace, fierce blows." Pathless narrowed his eyes and nodded as he listened. After Han was done, he couldn't help but to exclaim, "You have exceeded my expectations. Looks like you truly understood the meaning behind Star Break Fist. Overall, Star Break is about breaking the routine. When the enemy's strong, teachers usually tell you to first avoid the edge and then choose the right time to strike, but Star Break is the direct opposite and tells you to break storms with storms. Like I said before, the highest level of martial arts is actually about forgetting. Only when you forget all those moves, then you won't be restrained by them. And without restraints, then you can unleash the strongest fighting strength. Learning martial arts is about remembering what's exactly taught in the books. No, it never is. Everyone's a different individual. No matter how good someone is with a style of martial art, it might not be the best for you. That's why we have to learn the martial art itself. It's not for learning those moves, but for how to convert the things you learned into your own fighting style. The wisest reason is to be unreasonable. The strongest martial art techniques is to have no techniques. Having no way is actually the way of the heaven. Having no way is actually the way of heaven. Han raised his head and asked. Pathless slightly smiled, and waved, "Go and attend the last stage of the pressure exam. I look forward to your performance." Han packed up his Dark Net login program, and walked out of the room with big steps. When he passed the lobby, he stopped at a screen and opened the shocking web page. It was the page that had the videos of how all the brothers from the training camp got eliminated, and below were many unsightly comments. Expressing the best satires towards the soldiers from Earth, saying that Earth is a planet that is rich in trash, and sent a group of trash-like espers to embarrass itself in front of the entire Milky Way. Long Chuan quietly came in on his wheelchair. Seeing Han watching those videos, he was a bit worried and said, "Han, time is running out." Han nodded, and whispered, "I know, there are 52 more hours until the end of the pressure exam. The fourth round is the medal game, which takes 12 hours, the fifth round is Meteor Shower, which is another 12 hours, and the last round is the Road to the Netherworld, which needs 24 hours. That's 48 hours in total, so we have enough time." Long Chuan slightly nodded. Han was the most unique member of the training camp. Although he was here, he wasn't anyone's student. Long Chuan knew clearly that Han had a rather mysterious teacher. "So you want to look at how others were eliminated? And then analyze their tactics?" Long Chuan curiously asked. Han shook his head. "No, I just want to remember those that laid hands on our people, and their names." "And then?" Long Chuan asked. "And then if I can meet them, kill them." Han replied with ice-cold tone. In the virtual reality pod, Han pressed the activation button. The light flashed past. After a lapse of several months, Han finally appeared at the Milky Way meets preliminary round lobby once again. Facing the familiar faces of the square and the portals, Han actually felt a bit warmth in his heart. There wasn't enough time left to the completion of the pressure exam. The majority of the contestants already completed all the tests and were waiting at home for the results. There weren't a lot of people left on the square, and it was a bit depressing. Han paused for a bit, and went straight to a random portal with big steps. In front of his chest was a light screen. Everyone could see clearly that he came from the 57th sector of the Milky Way, Earth. Look, another trash from Earth. What happened? Were all the trash from Earth eliminated? Maybe it's just some fish that slipped through the net that was scared, so he waited until the last moment to attend the exam. Quick, let's go to a portal. If we can go to the same battlefield as that brat, then it will be awesome. Someone placed a bounty: killing an Esper from Earth once is 1 million GC, beheading doubles the reward, and that's 2 million. It's like money that's just lying there. Finding out that Han was from Earth, the square became restless. Many people began to discuss how to take Han's head and exchange it for bounty. The square was open, and all those words also fell into Han's ears. One had just seen him step unhesitantly into the portal, and the corner of his mouth was curled in a slight grin. Chapter 69. Pinnacle of 3 stars. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outside of the pressure exam site, many pairs of eyes were looking at Han and praying for him. After all, the selected fighters from Earth were almost all wiped out, leaving Han as the only hope. Countless higher-ups from Earth Federation didn't even try contacting Han, afraid that they might be placing too much pressure on him. They were all, however, secretly paying attention to Han and his performance in the preliminaries. As supervisors of Han, Li Yu and Long Chuan were waiting anxiously as well. They hid in their office and nervously smoked cigarettes one after another. The broadcast footage finally appeared. Han arrived at the testing center for the Milky Way meets pressure exam. Han's physical data and registration information appeared on the right side of the screen. After Li Yu saw Han's power source index, he was immediately shocked. It has already reached 8,135. That's the pinnacle of 3 stars. So Han was actually that close to 4 stars now. Long Chuan, how come you never mentioned it to me? Li Yu's eyes opened up wide and said. And Long Chuan was so excited that he almost stood up from his wheelchair. He quavered, I thought you were paying attention to him. Li Yu smacked his thigh, hey. I thought you would be paying attention to Han, so that's why I never asked. Don't get excited first. Long Chuan quickly did some calculation in his mind and said in a deep voice, 2 months ago, when we invaded the raiders, Han's power source index was around 4,000, just reaching the intermediate 3 stars level. It has been 57 days and Han already broke 8,000, and that means, he increased his index by a full 4,000 in the past 57 days, averaging to a daily increase of around 70 units. ENV Long Chuan and Li Yu were speechless. Usually, as espers reached higher levels, their source index growth rate should start to slow down. That was why there were cases like Long Chuan who couldn't reach 5 stars in the past 10 years. But for Han, when his level increased, his power source index growth rate actually started to accelerate. Just 2 months ago, Han's daily growth rate was 50 units per day, but now it had reached 70 units. If this rate continued, then within a month, Han will break through and reach 4 stars. He will become a 4-star Esper soldier, capable of summoning a void domain of 100 meters in radius. 70 units of daily growth rate. What a monster! After a long silence, Li Yu swallowed a mouthful of spit and whispered. Shua. After the light flashed, Han was teleported to the 4th round of the pressure exam, the medal game. From this round, espers were allowed to freely fight each other, and the tournament organizers actually encouraged contestants to fight to the death, obviously making this test a lot more difficult to pass. The rules for the medal game was actually very simple. 10 espers were randomly chosen and teleported to a battlefield of 10 square kilometers. Everyone wore a golden badge on their chest, and the contestants had to try to seize as many of the other people's badges while protecting their own. Each badge was worth 100 points with a full score of 1,000. Losing your own badge means you were disqualified. After both of his feet touched the ground, Han quickly scanned his surroundings and noticed that he was in an ancient ruin. The center square was quite open and it was surrounded by large remnants of broken walls and cliffs. The 10 randomly chosen contestants all appeared in the center square, each being about 30 meters apart, giving them enough time to decide whether they want to charge into battle or retreat into the rubble and wait for the right time to launch surprise attacks. Aside from Han, the rest of the contestants were all 4 stars, and being only 3 stars, Han has the lowest level on this battlefield. But this was normal. Usually, among the 100,000 young espers that ended up qualifying for the official Milky Way meet, 4-star and 5-star fighters were about 50% each, and espers of these 2 levels were the main force that were participating in the race. Aside from them, there were a few individuals that had already achieved 6 stars and became quasi-warlords, but these geniuses were like the feathers of a phoenix and the scales of a Kylan. There were rarely more than 10 of them participating. After all, the people that were able to become quasi-warlords before the age of 30 were usually peerless geniuses. They might not even care to attend the meet. As to the 3-stars that make it to the finals, every time there were usually around 100, which was really insignificant in comparison to the total 100,000 contestants that compete in the finals. There's actually a guy from Earth. Cutting his head can be exchanged for 2 million GC. Right across from Han, a tall and buff warrior covered in tattoos pointed at Han and yelled. Shwa! Suddenly, everyone's eyes rested on Han, some were shocked, and some were surprised. This was the deadly tactic that the Sally Empire resorted to, placing heavy bounties on soldiers from Earth. Killing one will reward you with 1 million GC, and beheading one for public humiliation will be rewarded 2 million. In the Milky Way, the purchasing power of the GC was quite strong, and 2 million was enough to buy a civil-level starship without a weapon system, or a group of outstandingly pretty slave girls. For the soldiers participating in the pressure exam, they could earn money while battling, why not? So, before Han, all the brothers from Earth were beaten, beheaded and humiliated on the internet. The Sally Empire was too ostentatious and they really humiliated Earth this time. Don't let him get away. The tattooed fighter yelled, kill this guy first, we will split the reward. The one standing on the right side of Han was a small yet muscular black fighter, he sneered, split evenly. This battle is going to take 12 hours, only the man last standing is qualified to split the bounty. Whoever dies halfway doesn't count. The tattooed man thought for a moment, thought that it wasn't a bad idea and said, then, if everyone agrees, then we will first kill then guy from Earth, and then it will be a free-for-all after. The other 8 espers looked at each other and all gently nodded their head. After all, the battlefield was 10 square kilometers, and it was also the ruin of a complex terrain, good for hiding. They teamed up mainly because they were scared that Han might run away, which meant they would watch that pile of cash just fly away from their reach. After the temporary alliance was quickly formed, everyone started to close in, with the 2 espers closest to Han in the lead and others slowly approached Han. The tattooed guy even sent 2 others to cut off Han's retreat path. Seeing this scene, Li Yu and Long Chuan, and all the people on Earth watching the fight were all nervous to death. They've seen the same scene way too many times, the 48 brothers in the genius camp, were almost all killed that way. Everyone was very angry, they obviously had already guessed that it was the Sally Empire's conspiracy, but they couldn't do anything about it. After all, they didn't host the reward under their empire name, but rather a fake name. In addition, the pressure exam seems to not have the rule against placing bounties. Against the siege of the 9 4-star espers, Han didn't even try to run, but just stood there, shaking his head. His expression was a bit bitter. In the blink of an eye, they all surrounded Han, and the circle gradually got smaller. The enemy that was closest to Han was within 5 meters, and he could reach Han with one dash. At that moment, Han suddenly looked up and said emotionlessly, so my brothers were eliminated like this. It wasn't because they were not strong enough or didn't try hard enough, but because of how insidious the enemies are. Enough talk, cut his head. 2 million GC, here I come. The tattooed Esper shouted and everyone pounced towards Han. Gotcha! At that moment, Han's clenched fist suddenly opened. Void domain, open. Get ready for my fire fist. That tattooed soldier raised his fist and aimed for Han's head. But the reckless attacker didn't realize his fire fist was actually gone, because just at that moment when Han opened his palm, all of his power was robbed. Now, Han just needed 2 steps to kill an enemy. First, take their ability. Second, use his dark power to destroy them. Boom! The originally calm Han suddenly jumped up. His left leg lightly performed a skip step as he waved his right hand, delivering what seemed to be an ordinary punch, colliding with that tattooed guy's fire fist. That seemingly plain punch actually contained an unimaginable amount of momentum. The tattooed Esper's fist broke right at the point of collision. Soon followed by his entire arm, it completely fell to the ground, into broken pieces. Dark fist. That was the effect of infusing one's entire body with dark energy. The tattooed Esper's eyes became wide open in surprise, and he witnessed how his fist and arm broke inch by inch, and then his shoulder, and then his chest. All the humiliation that my comrade suffered, I will return it 2-fold. Han shouted in his heart, his eyes became colder and more merciless. Then, that short muscular black Esper charged at Han, and Han also went head-on against his attack. For the user of his star-breaking fist, there was no such saying as avoiding attacks, it had always been fighting violence with violence, and breaking storms with storms. Hong! Hong! The pride of my comrades, I will take them back. Hong! Hong! The humiliation my comrade suffered, I will make you pay back 100 times. Hong! Hong! Han roared again and again in his mind, completely releasing the anger he had accumulated for the past months. Although all the other contestants from Earth were no longer here, but Han was still fighting. And as long as Han still had breath left, the revenge would still be taken. Han's void end could completely deprive all power from the opponent, and that was already very unreasonable, but including the horrendous destructive power of his dark fist, no one present was able to withstand such violent attacks. After several rounds of Han beating the crap out of everyone, the battlefield became dead silent. Perfect score. 4th round of pressure exam, passed. Han emotionlessly picked up the golden badges in front the opponent's chest and looked up. At this moment, the screen beside him was especially bright. On top of it lied a few lines of very simple Milky Way universal language. Han Lang. 17 years old. Pinnacle 3-star. From the Earth Federation. I read the reviews from Novel Update, it was very heartwarming. I just want to say thank you to all those that took the time to write those awesome reviews. Sincerely, Cucumber Strips as well, we need your help in naming Han's attack thing so it doesn't cringe everybody's buttholes every single time they read it. Here are the few options we thought of. A. Dark Fist B, Dark Crit C, Nightfall Strike D, Inky Pinky E, Black Bean Splash F, Night Touch, or Night Bad Touch. Please comment your opinion in the bottom. Chapter 70. The Forbidden Art. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the virtual world. 1940 points after just the first 4 rounds. Nightwalker smiled and said, a perfect score on the pressure exam is 4,000 and usually as long as your score is close to 2,800, you will be qualified to attend the final. Seems like after training under a monster like you, Han won't have any problems making it into the finals. The atmosphere suddenly changed. Nightwalker stared at Pathless Origin, who was sitting beside him, and asked in curiosity, although I don't know too much about martial arts, but what you taught Han is significantly different from the others. He's like an unbreakable bamboo stick. Extremely flexible, the more pressure he receives from the enemy, the stronger he bounces back. And Han's attacks are extremely reckless, it doesn't seem like a formal martial art, but rather a natural force. What did you really teach Han? Could it be? Pathless said carelessly, I'm not crazy like you, how could I pass my treasured martial art to Han, he's not my student nor my son, why should I? What I taught him was just the star break fist. Although it's already one of the top-level martial arts in the Milky Way, it's nothing special. Night Walker laughed, and said, why are you still so tough with your words? I'm in pharmacology and in our industry, if a drug can be made as if it came from a balanced nature, then it has already reached the peak level. It's the same with martial arts, the highest type of martial arts is the one that people can't read, born out of nature, but also an existence that surpasses nature. If you dare to fool me because I don't know martial arts, I will stop supplying you drugs and let you feel like you would rather die. Humph. Although Pathless was still quite tough with his words, his attitude obviously softened up a bit. He rubbed his hands and said, I didn't lie to you because Han really thinks that I taught him the star break fist. But in fact, Night Walker asked curiously. In fact it's the 6 paths of the void. Sing Night Walker was suddenly shocked, and couldn't believe it, capable of destroying 9 layers of hell. Easily able to annihilate the 6 paths of reincarnation. Known as the strongest demonic strike style, the 6 paths of the void. Pathless didn't reply, but lightly nodded his head. Night Walker's eyes opened wide, you are crazy. The 6 paths of the void is forbidden. You actually taught Han a forbidden martial art. If someone knew, he could be killed because of it. Pathless disagreed and sneered, well, those so-called forbidden martial arts are only forbidden because they are too powerful, capable of causing too much death. But those so-called warlords or gods of war, which one of them didn't learn some forbidden arts? How come they can, but Han can't? I just want Han to skip those useless conventional fighting techniques, and let him go directly to the strongest and most ruthless style. Why are you so surprised, man? Night Walker was speechless for a while, but then he lightly shook his head, old monster, warlords can learn forbidden art because they are already above everyone. No one can do much to bring them down. But Han didn't even become an Esper for a year and you are already teaching him forbidden arts. Pathless still stubbornly said, that year, we were all fooled by those stupid rules of the Milky Way, and after so many years I realized that those so-called top-level martial arts are completely incomparable to the forbidden techniques. If I had started learning forbidden art since the very beginning, then my achievements would be a lot higher than now. And we won't be in this kind of stupid situation where we can't even show our faces in order to hide from those that want to kill us. In short, if I have gone through that detour, I won't let Han go through the same thing. What retarded conventional martial art, no need to learn it. If he's going to learn, then he's going to learn the best. Aren't you people in pharmacology the same? After so many years studying and researching, what are you working on right now? Isn't it still something forbidden? The so-called forbidden martial art or forbidden drugs, they are just above the conventional ways which most people can't accept. And that's not the fault of the forbidden art or drugs, but the fault of those people. Pathless origin was really unreasonable, and Night Walker sighed and muttered, it's not the same, it's not the same. Those warlords and drug grandmasters are learning forbidden stuff because they have reached the end of the conventional path, but Han just stepped into the conventional path and you already pushed him onto the evil path. Others are just walking and they ultimately walked into the evil path, but for Han, he had never walked on the normal road and can only be on the forbidden path from the start to the end. But for real though, you didn't teach all 6 paths to Han in one go, right? Pathless shook his head, nope, I just taught him the basics and didn't get to the 6 paths yet, so it's not too obvious, and he won't be caught in the Milky Way meat. Night Walker thought about it, laughed and said, I was just thinking how Han got so strong. Now he has Void End, a physique capable of resisting poisons, the Dark Fist, and also the forbidden arts taught by you, you old monster. With these 4 ultimate level techniques guarding him, those 4-star espers are obviously not his opponent. Pathless arrogantly laughed, after all he's someone I mentored. I will be honest with you, the present Han can kill all 4-star espers. As long as the espers are still 4-stars, none of them will be Han's opponent. Then, the tone of voice suddenly changed, and Pathless looked at Night Walker with an obviously not good intention and said, "Old Black, you are actually not mad because I taught Han the forbidden martial art, right? You are mad because you didn't even teach Han how to work with forbidden drugs and I already taught Han, so you are jealous of me." Night Walker hesitated. He forcefully waved his sleeves, and righteously said, "I'm obviously not crazy like you. You fighters can take shortcuts, but what people like me do is science, and there are no shortcuts in science." Sigh soon, Night Walker sighed and said, "But having said that, Han seems to be more interested in you. My pharmacological way doesn't seem to be his type." Pathless slapped his thigh and braggingly said, "See. Now you said the truth, I just knew that you were jealous of me." In the pressure exam, the time was a lot shorter than estimated. According to the rules, the fourth stage medal game could take up to 12 hours, but since Han's opponents decided to group up against him, they actually all got swept clean quickly by Han. From beginning to end, Han only took 11 minutes for his medal game. Shua Han returned to the familiar square, raised his head and looked at his score. He had gotten 940 from the first 3 stages, and a perfect score of 1000 points during the fourth stage, so now his overall score was already 1940. Recalling the memory of his last battle, Han felt a sense of fulfillment that couldn't be described. Looks like there was a big gap between those opponents and him. Even if the factors like his special dark power were excluded and they were compared solely on martial arts, there was still a big gap. For some reasons that couldn't be described, Han just felt that the enemy's martial arts were all too rigid. Their moves were just moves and they lacked efficiency and flexibility. But there was a big difference between Han and those opponents. Han seemed like he didn't know any martial arts, and all his attacks were casual and based on instinct. Many times, it was just an idea that popped up in his head and Han was able to unleash a move that other people couldn't understand. It was just like reading book. After Han read a book, he wouldn't remember the content of the book but instead, understood the meaning behind the book. Han obviously didn't know that the so-called called Star Break Fist was actually a forbidden art called the 6 Paths of the Void. To let a novice that had just awakened his power in the past year to directly learn the top-level forbidden martial art, this bold attempt might be the only instance of this in the entire Milky Way history. What can be sure was, Han already embarked on this difficult path that no one has ever tried before, and he will never be able to turn back. There was still some time left. Han didn't hurry to attend the 5th stage, but stayed still and wondered about that last fight to see what he could improve. Pathless was very clear when he taught Han. He told Han to let him experience and improve through battle, and Han obviously was never that type of muscular yet simple-minded fighter. He was very good at thinking and making conclusions. After about an hour, Han stood up, and chose to enter the 5th stage from the system menu. The same square and portal, and the same situation of many eyes focused on Han wanting to take his head to exchange for reward. Shua Han didn't pay attention to others. He went straight into the portal and entered the 5th stage, the meteor shower. Appearing in front of his eyes was 2 islands, and in between was a narrow strip of shallow water. Contestants needed to cross the shallow river and get to the other side. Rumble the earth was tremoring. The dark sky gave an oppressing doomsday-like atmosphere. Meteors started to fall from the sky one after another, and in the air floated a type of moving fireball, flying back and forth, threatening the contestants that were trying to cross the shallow river. And that was the so-called meteor shower stage. In fact, it was a lot like the previous stages, but just with a harsher environment and people were also allowed to kill each other. It wouldn't be easy to pass the shallow river as one needed to avoid the falling meteorites, dodge the flying fire, and also withstand the malicious opponents. In a swarm not far away, the contestants were like dogs jumping and chickens flying, jumping all over the places after being chased by the meteorites and flying fire, and suddenly there were also other soldiers jumping out to give unsuspecting contestants a stab in the back. Han observed for a few seconds and went straight down the shallow water. The river water covered Han's waist, which undoubtedly increased the difficulty of dodging threats, and the resisting force of water also slowed down the movement of the contestants. Han was obviously not scared of the flying fire. These attacks all mimicked the ranged attacks from fire descent espers, but Han had void end, and the fireballs flying in the air disappeared the moment it came close to Han, so he doesn't even need to dodge them. The larger threat was the meteorite. A rock that was the size of a man's head fell down at an incredible speed and smashed into the ground next to the river. If anyone was struck by it, they will get killed right on the spot. As for the surprise attacks from any opponents, it actually became a relatively minor threat. After all, everyone was busy dodging the flying fire and falling meteorites, there really wasn't too much energy left over for them to attack others. Everyone's advancing direction was not the same, some tried to get from this island to that island, and others tried to get from that island to this island. After several successive waves of fighters encountering Han, they all thought for a bit and decided to not attack Han. After all, the fact that Han wasn't afraid of the flying fire was quite strange. Those crimson-red fireballs kept on hitting Han but didn't even leave a mark. This made the contestants around him wary about Han's abilities. Faced with the double attack of the meteorites and flying fireballs, everyone naturally chose to protect themselves first. As to whether they could kill Han and claim the bounty, it became something secondary. Shua, a figure from behind Han, passed him. He was thin, tall, and familiar, like someone he saw before. The way he handled flying fire was shocking. When the crimson-red ball flew towards him, this man actually reached out his hands to take it. Then his wrist gently turned and the flying fire accelerated out of his hand like a bullet, hitting the soldiers around him. Hey! Damn! This guy is sneaky. Don't go near him. He's a devil. In the blink of an eye, a dozen contestants were already shot down by the tall thin fighter in front of him and got eliminated from the race. Han was behind him, and he could see that the man's mouth gently raised to a certain angle. He was smiling. It seemed that this person was only doing this for fun, and he had no other objectives. What's strange was, that tall thin guy would target everyone around him, but only not Han, who was behind him. Oh, it's him. Han carefully observed the back figure of that man, and suddenly understood why.